So, are we audible to everyone? We hope we are audible to everyone.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes.
So, we thank you all our guest participants. A very warm welcome to you all. My name is Mayank Krishna. I'm working as a senior assistant director in EPC India head office cell in New Delhi. Very warm welcome to you all. We to the interactive session with PricewaterhouseCoopers India on CBAM. As you are aware, PricewaterhouseCoopers is the world's leading Big Four consulting firm, which is having a vast expertise in consulting, ESG, and financial advisory services. We are really glad to have them on board here with us today on this important session. We are also delighted to have joined with us our EPC India Chairman, Sir Ashi Arun Gurudia, sir, along with Sir Madam Pallavi Saha, Senior Joint Director, and all our teammates. So before we begin the session, I'll give a brief background about EPC India. As you all might be aware that EPC India was set up in 1955 and today it is the largest trade promotion body in the engineering sector. We are representing more than 8,000 members from large, medium and small scale sector with over 60% of them from the MSME segment. So given the importance of the subject, we will not waste any time in this, and we will now begin with the session. So I now request our chairman, sir, Shri Arun Gurudia, sir, to kindly give the opening remarks.
Thank you, man. Distinguished speakers, guests, esteemed colleagues, and valued members of the Indian engineering sector. Very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the organizers. Today's session focuses on the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, a policy which is setting the precedents with far-reaching implications upon the global engineering trade. As we all know, the Indian engineering sector plays a crucial role in our nation's economic growth. Indian MSMEs are renowned for their cost competitiveness, quality, innovation, and efficiency globally. However, the international landscape regarding sustainability is rapidly evolving. European Union has taken a lead. Being the largest engineering trade partner, the introduction of CBAM presents both challenges and opportunities for our industry. The challenges are emerging in terms of compliance related hurdles, and the opportunities are emerging as well in terms of new value chain in sustainability. This awareness program aims to equip you with the knowledge and tools you need to navigate this new landscape. I extend my sincere thanks and gratitude to PwC India for accepting our invitation and enlighten us on this important subject. Over the course of this session, we will explore the specifics of CBAM, including its impact on the export of engineering goods, compliance procedures, and potential strategies for adaptation. We have very eminent speakers, Mr. Jit Aditya De, he is director with PwC, ESG strategy and transformation. And Mr. Mehul Tatia, he is associate director at PwC. He is also ESG strategy and transformation. Both having vast experience in the ESG strategy and implementation across the engineering verticals. And they are ready to share their insights and answer to the questions of the audience here to ensure a clear understanding of this critical topic. The session will discuss a few topics in detail, such as introduction to CBAM, CBAM requirements, CBAM computation and potential impact, and the way forward. I am thankful to all the participants who have joined with us here today. We have received several queries on CBAM along with the registration details, which we have already shared with our esteemed speakers, and hope they will address those issues during the session. And it will be all clear to us. I am grateful to the team EPC India who have been over the last 2 years actively striving to infuse active participation and engagement on CBAM and sustainability platforms with an objective to impart valuable insights among us into how to prepare our businesses for CBAM and potentially even turn this challenge into a competitive advantage. The Indian engineering sector has always been at the forefront of progress. I am confident that by working together, we can successfully navigate the implementation of a CBAM and emerge even stronger as a global leader. Thank you once again for joining us today. Let's embark on this informative journey together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman sir, for your kind welcome remarks. Now, before beginning the session, sir, and thank you for introducing our eminent speakers. And I'll just take a brief 2 minutes and giving their profile, reading out the profile. First speaker is Mr. Jitaditya De. Welcome to you for the meeting, sir. Jitaditya De, sir, is a director at PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and has more than 11 years of experience in ESG strategy and transformation. He is a BTech from NIT Kurukshetra and an MBA from IIM Udaipur. He has significant expertise in ESG strategy and transformation, net zero and carbon neutral strategies, energy transition, responsible investment, climate risk management, sustainable reporting, and disclosures. As part of the above, he has supported several clients from pharmaceutical, real estate, food and beverages, and renewable energy businesses in their overall journey. So we welcome you, Jitaditya sir, to the meeting. Our second speaker, Mr. Mehul Tatia sir, is uh, is uh, is he's an associate director at PwC. He has expertise in energy efficiency, sustainability, and climate change, and professional with more than 17 years of hands-on experience in consultancy as well as industry. Presently, Mr. Mehul is working as associate director and in ESG strategy and implementation. In past, he has worked with several power plants in operations, maintenance, and performance management department in some of the big manufacturing conglomerates like Shree Cement Limited, Hindalco Industries, and others. After industrial experience of 9 years, from past 7 years, Mr. Mehul has been working in energy and resource conservation studies, benchmarking studies, CAG studies, and various projects on sustainability and climate change. We welcome you as well, Mr. Mehul Tatia sir. Welcome you to the meeting. So I request now Mr. Jitaditya De sir to please carry on. Please come to the deliver your talk, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mank, and thank you, sir, for introducing our team, and welcome to all the EEPC members. How we wanted to do the overall session is just set a quick context in terms of why regulations such as CBAM is coming into impacts for various organizations, specifically from the Western worlds, including EU and US. Post that, we would go a little deep in terms of understanding the regulations, which sectors they are going to impact, potential requirements in the near term, which is associated with disclosures, and then what is the long term impact which could have organizations such as yours looking into specific areas for improvement, and then showcasing the worth of goods which we are potentially exporting to the EU domain. Let's go down, Mehul. Right. A quick context setting. So, as you would be aware, sustainability has been a topic which has picked up over the last 3 to 4 years. Aspects of environment, social, and governance, specifically around these 9 to 10 areas, have been in focus. Climate change is a topic which we have been associated and been impacted by a lot of these elements even today. If you see the northern temperatures, for example, reaching more than 50 degrees, which has been the highest ever been recorded in the history of the country. We feel the impacts today as we are sitting in our offices, maybe in air conditions, but yes, there is an absolute impact on the environment, and the effects of that is reaching out to common man as well. Now, seeing the impacts which we talk about today, there is a stakeholder expectation which has been reaching out to all corporates. Um, ex- Companies are now asked to talk about ESG related topics associated with their business, and their products as well. You would have seen regulations which have come and impacted organizations, whether it is across the globe or in India. So the Indian regulators, SEBI, has also come up with specific regulations on BRSR, which talks about disclosures of all aspects across environment, social, and governance, which is becoming mandatory and far reaching to organizations which are listed or non listed as well. Um, what stakeholders are also expecting is that you commit to certain areas, you showcase improvements. So for example, if emissions is the most important topic for the sector we are looking at, how are we ensuring that over the long term we are reducing emissions from the products which we are selling? And thirdly, they want you to hear to the regulations, hear to the expectations of these stakeholders, so as to create an impact. Let's go down. Now, as I talked about various regulations coming in, European Union also came up with certain specific regulations. EU Green Deal was basically the starting point, which led to the carbon border adjustment mechanism also coming in, focusing specifically on emissions, which we will be dealing in detail. But there are other countries who are following the overall regulatory environment as well, right? So India coming up with specific regulations for companies' operations, which is now extended to value chain. In fact, a lot of customers to whom you would be supplying in the market as well, in the domestic market, you would be asked upon similar information which EU is asking through the CBAM regulation. So the impact of regulation is not only from external environment, it is also from the domestic markets as well. Now, having said that, there are compliance requirements. Companies have been able to drive a change, drive benefits from some of these aspects as well. People are talking about potential impact or reach to various markets basis the products which they are selling. So for example, if your products are today better in terms of emissions, you can reach out to larger customer base, not only in India but far abroad as well. Investors are specifically looking at companies who are compliant to sustainability. There are aspects of investments and fundraisers which they look at potentially at small, medium, or large organizations while they're investing, and ESG is getting into some of these specific areas as well. Uh, Improving profits, I think the overall concept of sustainability comes on resource optimization. So if you're looking at investments in reducing emissions, that is potentially leading to certain amounts of reduction in your cost structures as well. A classic example here is your renewable energy setup. um, in places, in states in India where renewable energy have been allowed, organizations have been able to reduce their power and fuel cost substantially. In fact, we were doing a case led for a large manufacturing entity which was able to shift about 30 to 35% of their overall consumption of electricity to solar. They were able to reduce their power and fuel expenses, which was in the balance sheet, by 10%. Now, that is a huge impact for organizations such as these. Um, let's move ahead, Mehul. We'll now deep dive a little bit about the CBAM history and how it came up, specifically in terms of the requirements for organizations such as ours in India. Now, the origin of CBAM comes from the EU Green Deal, which talks about EU becoming the first carbon neutral um, continent by 2050. And in the long term pathway, they have defined smaller set of goals, which includes reduction of emissions by 40% in the next 6 to 7 years by 2030. Basis that ambition which you had talked about, they had come up with something known as Fit for 55 package. It was a series of proposals which was presented to the legislation or the European Commission to align the current set of policies, laws which are there in the country, which would help them achieve the overall target of carbon neutral continent in the next 20-25 years. When they looked at the potential laws, they talked about carbon emissions. They talked about the impact of products which was coming into the European Union, and hence the carbon border adjustment mechanism came into picture. They talked about carbon border adjustment mechanism as an process or a mechanism to price carbon emissions which are higher than industry standards, to ensure that products which are getting into the continent are efficient from a carbon emissions point of view or an intensity point of view. Now, the overall concept was to prevent carbon leakage, is what the EU regulations talk about. To associate or basically support the CBAM, there were certain set of schemes or activities which were also looked at. For example, EU emissions tracking scheme. This basically is a carbon market structure in the EU, which helps them to determine the potential carbon price associated with 1 ton of CO2, which is being generated in the market. Now, there is a connection between the EU ETS and CBAM, which we will talk in detail as well. I'll just briefly touch a base upon that. So, let's say the industry average of a carbon emission for a product is 100, and a company's emission profile of the same product is 105. So the extra amount of emissions, there would be an association of carbon tax which would be paid because of the carbon border adjustment mechanism. And this 5 tons which is associated as extra, the rate at which the carbon would be provided or would be taken up at will be associated or will be taken from the average cost from EU ETS. That's how the linkage between CBAM and EU ETS takes place. Let's go to the next slide, Mehul. Right. So I was talking about carbon leakage. As I described, it is specifically for goods which are getting imported into the EU region. The origination or the issue which you wanted to specifically look at was environmental impact, where they were suggesting that products which were coming from outside the country were inferior in terms of the carbon emission footprint. But there were also associated issues, which is basically jobs getting lost to organizations because of imports. The competitiveness of the domestic products was at risk, and they believed that technology developments only happen at organizations which are basically trying to look at products at reducing the emissions from a portfolio level. So they believed that the technology development has stopped from areas where the goods are getting imported from. That was the overall premise of how they started looking at putting a taxation structure which would allow other organizations to raise the standards of carbon emissions of a product and look into technology development which would potentially benefit EU in achieving the long-term goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. Next slide, please. Right. So, which are those sectors that are covered under CBAM? There are 7 sectors which have been covered under the first phase. Those are cement, iron and steel. There are certain sectors of iron and steel as well, which has been talked about: aluminium, hydrogen, fertilizer, and electricity. Now, there are specific HS codes which has been highlighted under the regulation. We'll show that in the subsequent discussion papers as well. Now, this forms a significant portion of the exports which goes out from India as well. More than 10% of our, in fact, more than 15% of our exports are in these regions. And hence, there is a significant impact which organizations in India would have because of this potential regulation. Let's go down, Mehul. Right. So, how should and why should we prepare because of the CBAM regulations? I think I touched base upon the impact of carbon pricing. So, there is, in case of our products not matching the average carbon emissions associated with the product category, there is a potential penalty which comes in from 2026 onwards, which would impact your cost competitiveness in the global supply chain. This has a direct impact on your competitiveness of the product. Your specific impact on balance sheets and P&L would be seen, and there would be requirements in terms of disclosure, in terms of investments, so that overall we show a decreasing trend of carbon associated to the product which we are selling to the market. Now, there are challenges as well as opportunities for us. We would want to focus on both of these as we move forward. We would try to talk about how do we account for some of these emissions, which is been asked by the regulation, and also potentially measures which some of the organizations can take up so that there could be an impact in terms of reducing the emissions which we are today talking about. Let's go ahead, Mehul. Right. So I would invite Mehul to just talk about specifics in terms of what steps industries would have to take up. Mehul, do you want to quickly go through some of these slides as well?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Jita. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Mehul Tatia. The next part of the presentation I'll be taking.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah. So actually, we need to understand what are the requirements which a company needs to follow to finally see what are the requirements for CBAM. So the first thing which we need to do as a part of CBAM is that you need to define your boundaries. That is where your product is actually getting manufactured. So when we say, let's say, you are manufacturing a particular auto component, then we need to understand which industry or which area that particular auto component part is getting manufactured, because according to that your parameters for the next part will get decided. uh, then specially the next part is the production processes. For example, this is specially applicable for people who are manufacturing raw material sort of, for example, raw steel or raw aluminium sheets. So for them you also need to understand what route of production you are following. For example, if you are manufacturing, let's say, steel, whether it is manufactured through blast furnace route or whether it is manufactured through electric arc furnace route. So that is the second part of it, that is production processes, right? Similarly, the reporting period, usually which is followed for CBAM, is it is followed quarterly. That is, every quarter you will have to give a certain report to your supplier. That means to whomever you are actually supplying your products, you will have to actually report it to him. For example, it could be Jan to March, April, May, June, something like that. So every quarter you have to do the reporting on a regular basis. The next part is what are the parameters you need to monitor and you need to report. There are three major parameters. The first part being direct emissions. Those who are aware about GHG emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, it is very similar to scope 1 emissions. All the fuels which are getting burnt inside your plant, which are getting combusted inside your plant, will fall under direct emissions. The second part is indirect emissions, the emissions related to electricity. Whatever electricity you are purchasing from grid or your own generations will be the second part of it, indirect emissions. The last part is the precursors. Precursors being the raw material which you are manufacturing. Let's say you are manufacturing a particular auto component. Let's say you are manufacturing a gear. Now, the raw material for manufacturing that gear could be steel, right? So the steel becomes your precursor. It becomes the raw material which is getting utilized. And in terms of methodology, you need to know what are the quantities getting manufactured, what is the raw material quantity which is getting utilized, what are the various conversion factors, what are the emission factors, and if any carbon price is being paid in our jurisdiction. So as of now, India doesn't have a carbon price. But maybe in the year 2025, 26, we will see Indian national market coming up, Indian carbon market coming up, and then a price would also be associated with the carbon price which we are paying to the government. Now this is the requirement of CBAM. Now, how to manage this is something which is internal to organizations. For example, many of the organizations, what they are trying to do now is they are creating a CBAM management handbook. So they are actually monthly, on a monthly basis, they are actually started monitoring their parameters. They have started tracking their productions. They have started tracking the raw material consumptions. So that is how they are actually, managing the requirements of CBAM. Uh, I'll go to the next slide. Now, let us have a quick look at some of the timelines for CBAM. So the CBAM actually came into picture somewhere in the month of October 2023, where we actually have to start our first phase of reporting. That is from October 2023 to January 24. That actually became the first quarter where companies have to start collecting the data and they have to start getting the reports being done. Uh, the next part is that is so this will continue on a quarterly basis from October 2023 to October 2025, right? So complete three till 2025, you will have to be reporting on a quarterly basis to the customer or to the companies where you are actually exporting your products. Now, beyond 2025, what will happen is that, let's say January 2026, uh, you will have to start purchasing CBAM certificates, which will be equivalent to the prices related to the EU ETS carbon market. I think Jeet was explaining to you about that in the earlier slides. So, whatever is the carbon footprint of your particular product, you will have to buy equivalent certificates from the EU ETS market. uh, at this moment, that is the price, the coverage of the carbon footprint will be in a gradual manner. That is, the complete carbon footprint will not be covered in the initial years, but beyond 2020 2034, there will be 100% coverage of all the embedded emissions of your product, right? So as of now, it is only reporting till 2026, January 2026. You will just have to report your emissions, get yourself sort of prepared for the CBAM reporting. Beyond 2026, there will be gradual increase in the carbon percentage coverage. And beyond 2034, 100% of your embedded emissions will be covered for carbon prices, right? Now, uh, how do a company decide to go about CBAM? I mean, how do you know whether your product is getting covered under CBAM or not, right? So the first thing is that the first question that would come to your mind is whether your product is getting covered under CBAM or not. So CBAM has actually given a list of HSN codes which are applicable presently under CBAM, right? So you have to go through that list and see whether your product's HSN codes are getting mapped or not, right? So if it is getting mapped, then you have to follow the yes flow chart. If it is not applicable to not applicable, so as of now, you need not worry about it. The second part is uh, the embedded emissions. Can you actually calculate the embedded emissions, right? So if no, then EU, European Union, has actually given a list of default emission factors which can be used. Now, sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. So the default emission factors have been given by European Union, and that can actually be used by you to start the reporting. But a small disclaimer here: July onwards, that is July 2024 onwards, those default emissions will not be. I mean, you cannot actually use that, right? So you will actually have to go to your suppliers. Let's say you are manufacturing a gear, and for manufacturing that gear, you're actually taking steel from some of the top steel manufacturing companies. So you will have to go to your steel manufacturing company and say that we need to do CBAM reporting, and please provide us the data. That is, what is the carbon footprint of the raw material, right? So that is the first part of it. So after that, When you have all your data related to CBAM, you will have to start reporting. The first quarter was October 2023 onwards, and
बाकी सारा
now
सिर्फ ठीक ही करना, सिर्फ ऊपर इंटरनली आपकी है वो.
uh, can you mute your mics,
Thank
please?
you.
Yeah. So now from quarter 2023, that is January 2024 onwards, you have to start reporting for all the quarters on a regular basis. Now, in the earlier slides, I was talking about some of the HSN codes which are applicable. So here we can see the complete list of all HSN codes which are applicable and which have to be considered when you are deciding whether CBAM is applicable to you or not. So, for example, you can see aluminium. So, for example, in aluminium, if you are manufacturing, let's say, foil, so aluminium foil will have an HSN code which starts with 7607. HSN code is very unique. It is a 8-digit code, and the series starting with 7607 will be for foils. Similarly, if it is iron and steel, let's say you are manufacturing tube fittings, then the HSN code would be 7307, right? So similarly, you will have to see whichever HSN code is applicable for you, or whichever product falls under these number of HSN codes, you will have to go ahead and start reporting, right? The next part is, how do you do CBAM computation, and what
Mehul,
would be the
sorry to interrupt.
yes.
I think your slide is stuck on slide 14. I think you have moved on to the next ones. We just check or maybe reshare.
Okay, I'll just reshare. Yeah. I'll just reshare. Is it okay now?
It's coming up. It's on slide 14. Just do next.
Yeah, I went to the
Yes,
next
now the
slide.
HSN code slide is there.
Yeah.
I think you were referring to this, but people did not have
Okay, so
context.
I'll just take this slide once again.
Yeah.
Give me a second, please.
Hmm.
So I was talking about the HSN codes. So this is the list of HSN codes which are applicable for CBAM. So if you can see, I was talking about, let's say you are manufacturer of a aluminium foil, then your HSN code will actually start with 7607, right? So if your HSN codes falls under that particular code, you will actually have to report your CBAM related data. Similarly, let's say you are a tube manufacturing company, right? Let's say you are manufacturing tube fittings, then your HSN code will be starting from 7307, right? So accordingly, you will have to check what are the HSN codes which are applicable for the products you manufacture. And if it is falling under these HSN codes, you will have to start communicating your CBAM data to the European customers, right? I'll go to the next slide. So I'll now talk about CBAM computation, how you are actually computing the various values which are required to be declared, as well as what could be a potential impact. I mean, as of now, we are just talking about reporting our emissions. So I mean, it is more of a computation work, or it is more of a reporting work. But come January 2026, you will actually have to pay certain amount of money to comply with the EU norms. So what could be the potential impact? We'll just have a look at that as well. So the first part, which I have also talked in the earlier slide, that we have also talked in the earlier slide, is the embedded emissions. So when we say embedded emissions, there are three parts to it, right? The first part is the direct emissions. Can you all please mute your mics? I can hear some disturbance. Thank you. So there are three parts to the embedded emissions. The first part being direct emissions. So whatever emissions which are happening inside the boundary of your company uh, are called the direct emissions. Let's say you are burning diesel in your furnaces, or you are burning natural gas in your furnaces, or let's say you are using coal as one of the fuels. Then that becomes part of your direct emissions. It is similar to scope 1 emissions if you are conversant with the terminology used in GHG emissions. The next part is indirect emissions. When we say indirect emissions, it is the emissions related to the electricity which is getting consumed in the premises. That is electricity which you are purchasing from the grid, right? Again, it is similar to scope 2 emissions. Now, as of now, there are certain products under iron, steel, and aluminium where though you have to declare your indirect emissions, but the prices, the cost will not be applicable to them, right? Now, the third part to embedded emissions is the emissions due to precursors. Precursors is equivalent to whatever raw material you are using. As I gave you an example earlier, let's say you are manufacturing an auto component. I'll take a simple example of gear. So let's say steel becomes your raw material, right? So emissions related to steel will be the emissions related to the precursor. Precursor is, I mean, you can easily say these are as good as your basic raw materials. So what European Union has done is that for all the HSN codes, they have given a relevant precursor. For example, let's say you are manufacturing aluminium foil, right? So aluminium sheets become the precursor for aluminium foils, right? Similarly, let's say you are manufacturing a different auto component. Then in that case, steel, raw steel becomes raw material or precursor for your particular product. So you will have to get in touch with your suppliers who are providing you uh, uh, raw materials, and you will have to ask them to provide you emissions related to the particular precursors, right? So this is a illustration for a steel sector. I think I have taken enough examples, but still I'll go into some details about it. So you have to start reporting from October 2023. October 2023 was the first quarter. That is October to January 24 was the first quarter. January onwards, it became the second quarter, and so on. Whichever CBAM HSN codes are applicable or are mentioned in the EU notification, they will have to go ahead and declare their product details. The contents would be how much quantity of product you are actually exporting, what are the direct emissions related to your product, what are the indirect emissions related to your product, and if you are paying any local carbon price, right? So in India as of now, there is no major carbon price which is associated, but when the Indian carbon market comes up, you will have to pay a certain carbon fee to the Indian market as well, right? So in that case, what will happen is that EU will deduct that much amount of money from the fees which is due for you. Let's say you have to pay $100 per ton of your product as a fee to EU, European Union, right? And in India, let's say you are paying $20 to the Indian government. So EU will not take $100; they will actually deduct the money which you are paying to the local government, right? Since we are talking about the iron and steel product, so the production unit itself is in terms of tons, whatever amount of manufacturing you are doing in that particular quarter. Uh, it could be the associated activities could be producing, melting, refining iron, steel or ferrous alloys, manufacturing of semi-finished and basic steel products. The relevant greenhouse gas for iron and steel sector is carbon dioxide. The emission measurement will happen in tons of carbon dioxide, both for indirect, direct, as well as embedded, that is due to your precursors. All of them will be measured in tons of CO2, right? Now, let us understand what could be the possible impact on the pricing of steel. Again, I'm taking a steel example. So I mean, the cost of steel per ton as per the international markets is in the range of 47,200 rupees. The usually the carbon footprint of steel is in the range of 2.5 tons of CO2 per ton of steel, right? So if we take a EU ETS price of €50, I mean, let's say the EU ETS price is at around €50, the price corresponding to 2.5 tons of emissions from your product would be equivalent to 10,748 rupees, right? So if you see the cost of steel, which was earlier 47,200 rupees, when you put the carbon price, the carbon border adjustment price to it, it actually becomes 57,940 rupees, 48 rupees, which is almost equivalent to more than 20% of price increase. And that is why getting awareness about CBAM is really important, because as of now you are just doing reporting, but in the coming months, let's say beyond 2026, you will actually have to pay amount of money equivalent to your production process or your carbon footprint of your product. So it is important that you not only start reporting, but you also start looking at ways how you can actually reduce your carbon footprint of your particular product. So, I mean, in terms of steel, we are actually seeing almost 22 to 35% of price increase, because present price of CBAM, that is EU ETS carbon credit, is almost 80 euros, right? So, I mean, it is almost a 35% increase in price for steel sector. Now, earlier I was also talking about that if you're paying a certain amount of carbon price to your local government, in India, as of now, it is not there, but there is already a proposed carbon market which will start in the month, let's say in the year of 2025. Let's say you are paying around 8 euros to it, right? Let's say, imagine that India's carbon market comes up in the next year and you actually pay 8 euros to it. So EU, instead of charging you 10,748 rupees, they will only be charging you 8,947 rupees. That is, the 8 euros they will actually reduce from your carbon fees, right? So that was all about the computation of it. The way forward to is that companies need to start preparing themselves for CBAM. They need to have a system in place. For example, a CBAM handbook, a CBAM organization where certain people from different departments come in and have a process in place, how to collect data, how to report data, how to maintain data, how to ensure that whatever emission factors you are using while calculating the carbon footprint are kept in place. Similarly, not only reporting part and the declaration part, but you also need to devise a plan of how you can actually reduce your footprint in the next two to 3 years. Uh, Otherwise, there could almost be a 25 to 35% increase in the prices of your products. So I'm coming to the last slide. You need to ensure that you have a internal audit in place where you identify what are the gaps in terms of data collection and in terms of identifying the emission factors, and you should start addressing those gaps. You should devise a framework in terms of how to monitor, measure, and report CBAM activities. Parallelly, you need to devise a decarbonization roadmap, like how you, in the next, let's say, 4 or 5 years, how you'll actually reduce the carbon footprint of your products. And parallelly, are there ways where you can reach out to the local government, Indian government, and see where certain policy advocacy can be done amongst the governments to ensure that uh, the fees attached to is it either gets reduced, or there are certain other mechanisms developed to reduce the cost impact. So that's all from my side. That was the last slide I have in mind. Please let me know if you have any questions. We'll be happy to answer. Jeet, if you would like to add anything at the
Yeah,
end.
yeah. So I think I was parallelly when we were talking about, I was putting across replies to certain questions which came up in the chat box. There's one question or a couple of questions associated to how do we compute carbon emissions, specifically or CO2 emissions. Maybe just put up that slide of direct indirect emissions. I will try to answer that question as well. So typically, carbon emissions associated to your operations are been defined by a protocol which is known as GHG protocol. Now, a similar ISO certification is also associated with computation of um, greenhouse gases emissions. In that, there are three types of emissions: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. The scope 1 emission is all about your fuel and fugitive emissions associated to your operation. So any fuel which you are consuming, let's say diesel, natural gas, petrol, maybe HSD, any form of fuel which is getting burnt at your premises, which is because of the units which you're running, associated emissions become scope 1 or direct emissions. That is something which you need to collect. So there would be a system in your organization to talk about the total fuel consumption. There is an associated emission factor which is published by international agencies. Multiply the quantum and the factor, you get a scope 1 emission. Similarly, indirect emissions is associated with electricity which you are consuming. Now, electricity again would be supplied by your state utilities. You get the quantum of electricity which is being consumed over a period of time, which is the reporting boundary. If let's say if you're talking about a month, what is the monthly consumption which you would have? There is an emission factor which every year CEA publishes. You can use that and come up with the associated indirect emission. The associated emissions which Mehul was talking about is associated with scope 3 emissions, and it separately talks about whatever you're procuring. So let's say you're procuring a certain set of iron ore, a quantum of iron ore. Associated emissions also need to be added on to the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions which we just talked about. The process is same. The quantum of iron ore you are procuring multiplied by the specific emission factor. The formula is standard. The formula is easy. Organizations will have to set up processes to ensure that the data points for each elements which we just talked about, fuel or electricity or the raw materials which you are consuming because of the processes which you have, they need to be accounted for and then potentially used for calculations as well. I hope I was able to answer the question a couple of our members had raised.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Before we move ahead, our chairman has a few questions. So,
Sure. Yes.
Jeet, thank you very much for putting up such a beautiful presentation, very simplified. One can understand very well. I have a few things which I just wanted to clarify. I have attended a few sessions along with the Government of India also, wherein many experts had also come there. One or two important things, like you mentioned about the raw material, which is produced by the say, steel producer or the aluminum producer. First of all, they need to provide a certificate of carbon emission, which they have not started, because I was the first person to raise this chapter with Government of India and the ministry. That first of all, the producer has to issue a certificate saying how much carbon has been emitted.
Exactly.
So far, they have not made up any mechanism. As of yesterday, we do not know of any mechanism. I don't know if today they have done something on that. So that is a very, very vital thing. Then number two, the steel producers, like they have different processes. You were mentioning just now, one is a blast furnace route, the second one is the electric furnace route. So what we appeared that blast furnace route that generates too much of carbon emission, and electric arc furnace that is under permissible limit of European Union. So what steel producers will start doing, they will start exporting steel from their premises, the steel which is produced by EAF, electric arc furnace, and the blast furnace route, steel they will start dumping in the domestic market. So we are really very apprehensive about that. So you are experts, you can understand that.
Yes.
Then on my next thing was, earlier we were told that ferroalloy has been included in the HS codes, but in these HS codes I don't find ferroalloy. And ferroalloy also generates too much of carbon emission is there in that industry. I don't know why European Union has left it, or I don't know what has happened in that. And the next thing was regarding this electricity. I was told that electricity will be considered from 2034 onwards, not now.
Yes.
Because that we do not have to use that as carbon emission payment from 1st of January 26. That will come into being from 2034. And
yes,
my last thing was regarding the agencies. You will have to explain us who's going to audit, who's going to make the procedural papers for the declaration, how much carbon footprint has been generated, maybe by major producer or the secondary producer or the MSME units who are making value-added products. So if you can clarify these things, I think these are the common things which I have learned at every level.
Jeet, do you want me to
I
start?
think the initial points at which you just talked about, from a blast furnace perspective to an electric one, I think yes, that is a very huge impact of potentially taking up inferior quality, not, I would not say inferior quality, but yeah, having a higher carbon footprint which is getting dumped into the domestic market. That is a potential impact, and yes, organizations have plans to actually use a specific set of processes and generate or produce items which they would export and then use it for the domestic markets. I am also aware of certain steel producers who have already done that change, in fact, in their production processes. What organizations are also doing is they are specifically for both the types of processes, they are doing something known as product carbon footprint, which is a similar process which we just talked about from scope 1, scope 2 calculation. They have done a product carbon footprint for both the lines of production, and hence the certificate which gets generated for an efficient process, they will use that to the European markets, and the other one they would be using it for domestic markets. So I am aware of the points which you are just talking about, which potentially will also get negated once the domestic carbon market comes in. Now, the domestic carbon market would also have an average carbon intensity, and also specific sectors which are getting impacted under CBAM are being talked about in the domestic carbon market as well. Now, once that comes in, then you would have actual implementation of reduction of emissions in the Indian market as well. So I think that's just a matter of time where the domestic market comes in, and we would see organizations getting in line with the requirements as well. In terms of challenges, yes, we see organizations having challenges in terms of doing these computations. There are a set of protocols. In fact, we believe EPC's platform can actually help organizations in terms of understanding how do you do these computations and report it on a ongoing basis. And we were discussing that with ma'am also in our preliminary conversations, that why don't we create a simple calculator and provide training to our members which they can use for doing computations at their end. Once they do that, there are specific external auditors who can validate the computation and give those certificates which they would need on a quarterly, monthly, or an annual basis, whether it's the customer in the EU asking, or in fact there could be other customers across the countries or boards which they would need to publish similar certificates. So I think this becomes a very good platform for creating a standardized template and a calculator where they can put in the quantum of items which we just were talking about. It gets regularly updated, let's say every 6 months or every quarter, because emission factors may or may not change for certain categories of raw materials, let's say they are putting in. And once you have that calculator in place, a lot of the SMEs will benefit from that, and they will be able to use that calculator to publish the information they need to put in. I think I saw a comment from in the chat box that consulting firms are charging heavily for doing this computation. So why don't we simplify it, right? Why don't we make this process of generating information easier for them, and then actual investments can happen in improving process or actually reducing the emissions which they would have from the processes.
But Jeet, can you tell us if European Union has already given some accreditation to some Indian companies who will be doing this sort of a work? Because I understand the EU accreditation has to be necessary, otherwise they will not accept the certificates.
No, as of now, there is no accreditation required, sir.
Hmm.
But moving on after 2026, actually, we will have to get a third-party verification for your reports. So whatever reports you are actually sending to Europe, those reports had to be getting third-party verified.
Okay, thank you.
I
Yeah,
think, sir,
thank
you
you.
were also asking about ferroalloys not
Ah,
being
yes.
part of
I
the
was
list.
asking about ferroalloys. Earlier we
Yes, yes, ma'am. Please. Yes, I forgot that
So,
point.
sir,
Yes.
what has happened is that, in fact, if you see our initial list, there was also organic chemicals and polymers written in there. So, what has happened is that due to some of the complexities of this, EU is yet to identify ways of how the accounting of these carbon footprint of these products would happen. So, maybe at a later stage, these things may come in again. But as of now, it is not there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for detailed information. Sir, for the speakers, sir, we have quite a few more questions in the chat box. So, would you like to address them? So, if I may just read out for Mr. Pradeep. He has raised a query that many small steel mills not yet started to take steps to measure carbon footprints. In such case, how to report CBAM to EU customers after April 2024?
I think for all the participants here, the bare minimum ask is to start doing the computations. As we were talking about, start setting up those simple processes to capture fuel consumption, maybe if refrigerants which they are getting consumed, electricity which is getting consumed, and raw material quantums. Once they start doing it, they would be able to come up with these scope 1, scope 2, or the indirect emissions which we were talking about, and potentially go back to their customers in reporting this information. So the process for capturing the data needs to be started, and it's once they start getting information from that month onward. So it's high time that we set up these processes internally and start doing these computations as well.
Okay, thank you,
Also,
sir.
I
So,
think
the next.
Jeet, sorry to interrupt. I think Jeet, I think the question was also towards precursors that the suppliers are not giving data for that. So I think a simple way of doing it is that you will have to put certain pressure. You will have to keep continuously writing to them. Since CBAM is getting applicable for you and it is getting mandatory for you, so it is also in some ways or the other getting mandatory for them. So it will be sort of a pressure tactics, or regularly communicate with them the requirement of it.
Correct.
Once they see the yes, yeah.
So once you start.
Because users are so strong, you cannot dictate terms.
Correct. I was going to come to that. So
Right.
once we start collecting the quantum of produce or purchase which we have to start using the national averages or international averages for associated products. Now, let's say 2 years down the line, if your suppliers are able to give information, you improve on the reporting. But to start with, we use whatever um, publicly available standards are talking about. We use that and report our numbers. That's how most of the organizations are today doing it.
And also, as one of the examples where I'm actually supporting a client for CBAM reporting, they actually wrote to their supplier and they actually reverted back with numbers. So, I mean, that thing will gradually happen.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you. Mayank, maybe I would request that you kindly type your email ID on the chat box, since we had scheduled this session for 1 hour. We are running short of time. I also wanted to ask Mr. Day and Mr. Mehul if we can share a copy of the PPT with the participants, if it is okay
Yes,
with.
ma'am. Yes,
Yes,
ma'am. You can
we'll do that.
share it. In fact, you can share our contact details as well. I'm sure they would have a certain set of queries.
And
And we can.
very much appreciate your idea of building an online portal for computation. So
Mhm.
let us work together on making it simpler, the understanding of CBAM calculation simpler for our members, and we'll certainly be in touch with you on how this formula can be taken forward.
Absolutely, ma'am. We'll be
So
happy to go.
can you just type your email ID on the chat box? And I would request Chairman Sir to kindly conclude the session with a formal vote of thanks to the esteemed speakers.
Well, I must thank a gentleman coming from PwC, Jit Aditya De and Mehul Tatia. It has been really a wonderful presentation from you. You have really made the presentation very simple and understandable. Otherwise, normally these things, they become so boring to understand. But you have really made it very simple, I must say. I must appreciate that. And you already answered many questions. And in the presentation also, a lot of questions are already answered by yourself. And we really look forward to work with PwC. Let us see jointly if we can make out a portal which will solve the issues for our members. As you know, we have over 9,000 members all over India, and we really want to be meaningful to our members. We want that they should not suffer with the European Union with the shipments, because most of the companies, as we understand now, the European Union companies are not really hankering for this data at all at the moment. But sooner or later, one fine morning, they will wake up and they will ask for the backdated data also. So it is better to start preparation today than going tomorrow. So it is really good suggestion from you. Kindly keep on talking to us from time to time. We'll be also in touch with you so that we can develop all these things. And I must appreciate the patience of all the audience who have really tried to understand the things over here. Some questions have been answered, and whatever members you have asked in the chat box or you are going to send the email, we will clarify from PwC and put it forward to everybody's attention so that we all know and we are at the same platform. It is not for one or two parties, it is for all the members of EPC. They need to know this subject and comply to the requirements so that from 1st January 26, we are not in distress to pay the money at 50 euros per ton or maybe 80 euros per ton. We don't know what it is going to be tomorrow. So friends, thank you very much for joining in here this afternoon and have a great evening. Before I conclude, Pallavi is going to say something about.
Right. So thank you to all the participants and to the PwC team. From our end, we will be sharing a copy of the presentation with all of you to have a look at it in detail. And in future, in case you come up with a few queries or concerns, please feel free to get in touch with us. We'll try to facilitate your queries to the maximum extent possible. I just want to mention here that in order to create and increase the awareness about these carbon footprints and related concepts, EEPC India is also launching the Green Awards. So we'll be launching it on the World Environment Day. I encourage the members to kindly participate and in this award also, and it will help to also monitor your in-house system about these reporting mechanisms. So it will be live very soon. I encourage all the members to kindly have a look at that as well. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
क्वेश्चन बराबर हो तो वीक में ऑर्डर वीक में 5 मंथ का सैंपल इनपुट देना रेगुलर